Good afternoon, everyone. How are you guys feeling? I'm good. Oh, okay. I'm Marcus. I'm the head of ecosystem growth at 98. I'll be honored today to moderate our panel about privacy and mass adoption. For those of you who don't know, at 98, we've been in the space for 7 years. We're building Coin98 wallet with 9 million users worldwide. But right now, my role focusing on growing the ecosystem for our blockchain is EVM compatible L1 with supporting builders to grow in the region that we have, particularly in Southeast Asia. And for today, I'd love to take a minute to let the panelists to introduce themselves and about their project as well. So start with you first, Asaf.
Thank you. So we believe that privacy is inevitable in public blockchains. We believe that no institutions will do anything on-chain if the blockchain can keep a secret. And I don't see the next billion users coming to crypto when their entire privacy is jeopardized the way it is right now. So with that in mind, we are building the fastest and lightest Web3 privacy layer. So it works on Ethereum, on testnet, and will work on 71 other blockchains by March next year.
Hi everyone, I'm Eunice Giarda, co-founder and COO of Monad Labs. We're building the Monad blockchain, which is a new high-performance EVM L1. There's a couple of intrinsic improvements that are being made across the EVM client as well as the consensus mechanism. And the blockchain will be going to testnet very soon.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Yannick, co-founder and CEO at Arcium, and we are building a confidential computing network. We like to call ourselves the global supercomputer for the hyper-encrypted internet. So what we are allowing at the end of the day is for any kind of blockchain network and actually any kind of application, doesn't even have to be a smart contract application, to have access to efficient and entirely trustless confidential computing to enable confidential on-chain applications and also to enable confidential AI, for example. So in that context, we just last week announced our acquisition of our largest Web2 competitor, who've been doing confidential AI for TradFi, defense, and healthcare. And we are bringing all of that to a decentralized world, building this foundational layer on top of which any network, any application can have full efficient confidentiality.
Hey, I am Andrew Saunders. I'm the Chief Marketing and Growth Officer of Scale. What is Scale? We're the gas-free invisible blockchain. We're an EVM-compatible modular layer 1 network. We are the fastest chain, independently proven. We have 0 gas fees, which enables us to be invisible, which I can talk about later. We tend to be in the top 10 in terms of all blockchain activity. And we were just added to the Coinbase 50, which was very exciting this week. Yeah.
Cool. All right, without further ado, let's jump into the first question. I'll be talking about motivation, like for all audience here to know how important it is to be toward privacy in this space. Maybe Shana, you go first.
Yeah, I think, like I said it yesterday, that I find it frustrating that you actually need to explain why privacy is important because Web2 users take privacy for granted because that's how the tech stack is built as far as I understand. And Web3 users take the lack of privacy as granted because that's how the tech stack is built. And it feels that if we want to live in a world that doesn't have 5 companies that control the internet, and we want to live in a world where the internet is decentralized, then the ability to do some confidential computing, to not disclose everything on chain, is mandatory. So I think it's critical. To me, it's critical as scalability.
Cool. Ines, you want to add in? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, well, Monad being a typical public permissionless blockchain, I feel a little bit at odds with the rest of the speakers up here. But
we can help.
Exactly. I think I was just about to say, the fact that Web3 is an incredibly composable ecosystem means that even as a permissionless blockchain, there are opportunities for integration with other solutions that offer an element of privacy or security for applications that require it, for users that inherently want it, whether it be through some ZK solution, TE solution, or other.
Yeah, I actually share that vision. I feel like public ledgers can be public, that's fine, and it should really be this option to have privacy, to not have privacy, but I feel like this option shouldn't be given to the end user, because as you pointed out, the end user also doesn't really understand privacy, and it shouldn't be the end user's task to think about privacy, right? I also feel like that, of course, we need to educate about privacy, about confidentiality, and need to tell people about it, and also need to be political about it, right? But I feel like our approach should really be to allow for a kind of confidential computing that just allows for better applications, because then we can achieve this end of protecting the individual, of adding security to businesses, right? But just standing on top of the hill and screaming, we need privacy, why are you not implementing privacy, right? I feel like that has been tried in the past with different networks even, and different solutions, and the UX has not convinced people to adopt that kind of technology. So that's why the approach has to change, and I feel like we are now at this point where with composable systems it becomes possible to have this kind of confidential execution, to have privacy with varying levels of privacy even. I feel like it also always depends on the kind of application that has privacy, what kind of depth of privacy you actually require.
Bro, hit the nail on the head. So quick background, I come from big data and AI. I was at Amazon headquarters for a number of years. I think you have to think about privacy today and privacy tomorrow, and I think a lot of what you were saying is correct. Like, the average user today does not really understand the importance of first-party data protection, the risk of all of their centralized data. Look at like the hack of OpenAI, for example. That when that happened, as someone that comes from AI, I'm like, that is very problematic. There is probably a lot of sensitive data in there because people don't fully understand the risk of putting that data in there. I think the bottom line is, over time, and you're already seeing this with social media platforms, I think the average consumer will become more data savvy and more privacy savvy, and I think as a result they will start to question some of their decision making in the future based off of that, right? Because we're going to see an increased, not even in Web3, but in Web2, increased number of hacks and sophisticated things that are going to frighten the average customer, right? So when we look at scale, and I'll talk about this notion of invisible blockchain, because we're gas free, we can effectively create completely frictionless Web2-like experiences, right? So if you were a gamer, in typical blockchain fashion, you've got to connect a wallet, you've got to process transactions. If you're smart enough to install Wallet Guard, you're analyzing the risk before you create that transaction. For us, we can directly integrate into things like the Epic Game Store. The average user can come, download the game, play it, and not even realize that they're processing transactions on the blockchain, right? So I think to your point, you have to really take a consumer-focused approach. You have to remove some of the complexity for them and create systems that really enable and enhance privacy without their own personal requirements.
So you have to think about the end user from this UX perspective, right? Cost, efficiency, latency penalties, right? But you also need to think of the developer that implements this technology as a user, because if you're not building applications that have privacy, then you're building infrastructure. We, for example, are building infrastructure. And then you need tooling that actually allows to add this privacy, this confidentiality, in a way that doesn't require those developers to now become expert cryptographers and build these kind of systems. And I think that has also been a major problem in the past of just putting all of this burden on the last piece in the supply chain, which then is the application.
One thing I want to say, I've been a 3-time crypto CMO, multiple blockchains. For anyone that's a builder here and new to crypto, all auditing firms are not created the same. Do your due diligence, get multiple audits, because at the end of the day, sophisticated users are going to come to your site and they're going to look at that as a sense of safety and approval, right? So.
Yeah, it's interesting that you guys mentioned that like having mindset from the builder's perspective, foundation perspective for builders to build with privacy within their application for user, right? Is there any example for like have the balance between privacy, high standard privacy, and user experience that you can share? Any application in Web3 that?
Yeah, I mean, not to overly shill scale, but I mean that's really it. I mean, the build different thing is, we chose to build a very unique architecture, when I think a lot of folks were choosing to go in the roll-up direction. And as a result of that architecture, we're able to build very Web 2-like experiences. And that's why we're the #1 gaming chain, is we're bringing in traditional gamers because they're not having to go through all the barriers and friction that they typically do, in Web 3. But then if you look at the background, it's decentralized. We have obviously decentralized data on chain. We've got decentralized validators. And so, it's this balance where, I guess you could look at it as a mullet. It's a reverse mullet, I should say. It's party in the front, business in the back. Right in the front, it's very easy, it's very accessible, it's very fun. In the back, it is very technical, it is very robust, but created in a way that the developer and user doesn't have to experience that, I guess is the best way to put it.
I think what we have in Web3 actually is also a lot of quite bad examples. I think there's a lot of applications, and I spoke a few days ago at the Ethereum Cypherpunk Congress, and the position of these kinds of folks really is mostly about this political dimension. And when you only think in the political dimension about these kinds of issues, people tend to not build UX that is suitable for mainstream adoption. So I feel like really having this more business-focused approach of saying, okay, we want applications and technology that can be used by anyone, and then we achieve those ends. That's what we need, and that's also what you guys are doing with Monad, right? You're doing high performance, I think that is what it really boils down to.
Just to echo that, I don't think that privacy should be like a woke thing, right? Privacy in a blockchain is very woke. I think we should think about this in very practical business terms, right? Because, as I've mentioned, I don't think we'll see institutions doing anything that can't keep their secret, for instance, right? And that gives us the access. And I don't think that there should be a balance. Like, for instance, we try to build, the best performing privacy layer, so you wouldn't need to sacrifice performance to gain privacy. And lastly, I would say that, and I heard that yesterday from someone, is that if the whole pitch is, it's like a DEX, but with privacy, then you lost already. You can't beat this, but with that. You need to build something that is unique, that is good, that people actually prefer to their usual experience.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important, like for anyone that's a builder, ladies first, go ahead, you go. No, is you have to think about adoption, right? So, I remember when I started in the industry, it's like X% was on chain. I think right now we're at 6% is on chain. They're expecting, I think by 2025, 8%, right? So really your opportunity is the 94% today, the 92% next year, right? And so, going back to what you were saying, that's what's so important, right? You need to build in ways that are accessible to bring in that 92 to 96%, or otherwise you are literally just competing for the exact same users and the exact same liquidity. And honestly, there's always going to be something new, hot, bright, and shiny, and you are going to just continue to hemorrhage money marketing, trying to maintain, not even grow, but maintain.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Well, I don't need to rehash what everyone else up here has said, because I actually do agree with all of it. If anything, I was just going to say it's extremely encouraging that now we're getting to the point where we're recognizing that the point of building the things that we're building are for end users, like to benefit the experience, to benefit identifying exactly what makes Web3 unique, the composability aspect, the fact that there is sole ownership, should a user want that, should an application need that. And yeah, I don't know, I guess my point is it's just cool to hear, cool to see.
also speaking about balancing, I feel like that's also something important. That there's different kinds of technologies that can be used for confidential computing. So at Archium, for example, we're using secure multi-party computation. I think at Kotti you're also doing MPC.
We're using gobbling circuits,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is like a technique in MPC.
Exactly right. So the two of us basically are using cryptography in order to have very strong privacy guarantees. So for us that means operating in the so-called dishonest majority trust assumption. So we have a decentralized network of nodes that run a multi-party computation, and as long as there's one single participant that doesn't maliciously collaborate, basically is the entire network is one bad civil, one fake network, it's just one party, right? Then you have full confidentiality. And there's other parties that use trusted execution environments, for example. So putting trust in some single manufacturer to build hardware that comes with security and privacy promises. And for us, this decision has been very conscious to say, okay, we want the smallest possible trust assumption, but at the same time, we need to be as performant as possible. And there's many folks, and I think that's also differentiating between different blockchain networks that just don't want to solve those hard problems. That just accept those problems as given facts, as laws of nature, but they are not laws of nature. It's just about doing research, doing practical research, and doing engineering, and then it becomes possible to have the lowest trust assumptions and high performance. Yeah.
It's unfair to say that we're going to tap into the 98% that haven't in the space yet, right? Drive toward mass adoption. But how can we ensure the privacy, high standard of privacy, while tapping into them and ensuring compliance as well? Compliance will be a major issue when you want to tap to 98% of the population.
So I think something interesting we've been working on. So the first blockchain network that we are supporting is Solana, and maybe the second one will be Monet, I guess. And what the folks at the former Solana Labs team have been building over the last few years is a confidential token standard, where, for example, PayPal and Circle can issue stablecoins with a token extension that allows for zero knowledge proof based confidentiality when transferring tokens. So the sender addresses and recipient addresses are actually public, but what amount of tokens have been exchanged aren't public. And what we've designed is basically an extension to that that allows to now build applications to have smart contracts that can receive those confidential tokens, and then you do DeFi or whatever with that kind of applications. And what this native token standard has is basically issuer authority that sort of has read access. So that's not perfect privacy. That generally would mean that Circle could keep some books about what has happened with those transactions. But I feel like for stablecoin payments, something like this can make sense since you're trusting Circle regardless. So I think in that case, that's a practical solution that they've implemented that will allow for a first level of confidentiality. Yeah.
Sorry.
I was actually interpreting the question to be maybe a little bit more high level too, in terms of like, how do we ensure that a layer of privacy doesn't enable like malicious actors to get away with bad things, right? And especially from the perspective of, well, I guess like with a chain like Monad being permissionless, decentralized, could a privacy-oriented application mean that someone can just rug and get away with it? Or sanctioned states being able to do certain things. And my perception of that is honestly, I think similar to maybe applications of other types of things where like there is still an expectation and there should be an onus to, as an industry, still maintain honesty. And so, where if there's, for example, like actors that are known to be malicious, that participants who are validators or whatnot would be able to appropriately cut them out of the system or something along those lines. I know that it's a bit of it's a bit of a spicy topic, just because I know a lot of people are like, well, if it's ingrained in code, it's ingrained in code. But yeah, that's kind of the interpretation that I had about your question.
It's important to say that privacy is not illegal, it's actually protected by law. Privacy. Anonymity while doing financial transaction is against the law. So the way we think about this is what part of the transactions are confidential and what not. So if the addresses, for instance, play Alice and Bob, are just pseudonymous addresses, then that is accepted by law. If you were an institution, for instance, and transactions made by your users, you'd then publicly available on a public blockchain, you'd be probably breaking HIPAA or GDPR or some other regulations. So in that sense, we try to provide the best possible tools to developers to build with compliance in mind. But they shouldn't just be protecting AML and anti-terror laundering. They should be protecting privacy at the same time, because that is also like a right. So I think that's another way to think about it.
Yeah, and actually I feel like this framing of the question really shows like how privacy has been viewed in the past in the entire blockchain space, and how it should be viewed. It should really be viewed more as this computational privacy, because in the past it also has just been zero knowledge proof based, where it's simple kind of interactions that don't really allow for more complex applications. And what confidentiality actually means is being able to run some functionality that otherwise you could just execute on some single trusted server, right? And now it becomes possible to use a decentralized confidential computing network, and within that confidential computing network execute some functionality that is not public, that can autonomously be executed. And so I really feel like if you think about it that way, then those questions of course are important, but they sort of become secondary, because it's just like renting a server from AWS than how it is deploying some confidential computing virtual environment. And at the end of the day, it's like with any blockchain validator. The validator at the end of the day has to think about, okay, am I willing to process certain kind of transactions or computations. What we've done in our case is basically two different things. We have a cryptographic censorship resistance mechanism. So basically, the Archium network is clustered into computational clusters, so arbitrarily sized clusters that run those confidential computations. And those clusters get tasked with running confidential computations. Now, someone can build a smart contract that has a cluster associated that runs those computations. And the nodes are basically cryptographically forced to process all of those computations, because we need to align the censorship resistance of the blockchain the smart contract sits on with our network. At the same time, what if it turns out that the smart contract is doing something bad, which for some of the nodes that are part of that cluster might not be something they want to process from an ethical standpoint or from a legal standpoint can't process. In that case, they can just opt to fork that cluster or initiate a forced migration within the next epoch. And that's basically what happened on Ethereum with Tornado Cash, with validators then saying, okay, I'm sitting in the US, I can't process these kinds of transactions. So I think it boils down to the kind of infrastructure that we're building, that it should be this peer-to-peer permissionless infrastructure, where at the end of the day, every node can decide what their political risk potential is. Yeah.
Andrew, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different for us. Obviously, we're a blockchain, not a privacy layer. But I mean, when I look at scale, what it boils down to is, we are very decentralized. All of our nodes are effectively decentralized third parties. They're all, I would call it, kind of blue chip validators in the industry. And so, at the end of the day, we have no control over that, right? The bulk of the dApps that are built on scale, I mean, we are high throughput, meaning if you are building something that needs to process millions and millions of transactions, we are infinitely scalable to do that. So as a result, what tends to build on us is high throughput dApps, so games, AI projects like Xord, and again, a lot of these games in the Epic Game Store can all of a sudden go from 100,000 users to 20 million users, and it needs to be able to effectively continue to run fast and be high throughput and be secure. And I think by having this decentralized network of validators, it enables it to do that. Yeah.
What's your view on the mass adoption in the next couple years? It's some sort of prediction to.
It's coming.
It's coming.
So, real quick background: I've been a marketer for about 20 years. I worked in early social, early digital, AI, machine learning, autonomous vehicles, all these industries. I think the issue that we had up until now was regulation clarity, right? So the number one question I'm always asked, whether it's VCs, funds, builders, is what's going to drive mass adoption? And my hypothesis to date had been, with a lack of regulation clarity, it was going to be a breakout game, right? Or it was going to be a breakout social media network, not even SocialFi, right? Because these are two things that I've seen through, working with folks like Activision and Meta over the years, where they can scale very, very quickly, right? I think the challenge has been, obviously there's a lot of friction with blockchain technology. I think things like account abstraction will, and better user interfaces and things like that will help. I think, part of why I chose to go to scale was by being gasless, we were able to remove a lot of that friction for folks. But the third thing that can drive mass adoption, which I think we're kind of here, is Web2 businesses, right? So if you go back to when I worked at Amazon, we had the Prime Member Program, which I can't give the actual numbers publicly, but a very, very, very large percentage of Americans are Prime members, right? If they want to take scale technology and integrate it into the Prime Membership Program because it's gasless, they can instantly do that and bring in millions and millions and millions of people on chain, right? Or if you take the gaming sector, if you look at, I live in Los Angeles, folks like Activision, Epic, Riot, they've all been researching and experimenting in blockchain technology, but for them, they have very legitimate, publicly traded businesses that are high revenue generating. They don't want to do something that's going to put that business at risk, right? Now that we're going to hopefully get regulation clarity fairly soon, you're going to start to see them come into blockchain, and you'll probably start to see things like marketplaces, and you'll start to see blockchain technology built into more and more games. And again, it's not just that they have the resources, but think about it. You launch a game on Activision, you're putting $100 million in marketing behind it. You're leveraging an enormous, if you're Amazon, you're leveraging an enormous first-party database and can send emails to hundreds of millions of Americans and globally in 2 seconds. So I think Web 2 coming into Web 3 is really going to accelerate this very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, your one sentence prediction for 2025.
I totally agree that Web 2 adoption, enterprises actually using blockchain as coordination layers or to bring business there, will drive adoption. And one of the big prerequisites for that, I feel like, really is this confidential computing kind of privacy, to be actually able to run business logic on a distributed ledger, to not have to worry about all of the sensitive data being exposed. I think an interesting aspect in that regard is that large financial institutions are already running on private distributed ledgers, right? But they are not able to move to public ledgers due to those confidentiality concerns. So I feel like with the advent of our technology, that would be possible. Regulatory clarity definitely as well. So those two go hand in hand. Another interesting aspect, I feel like, and that's basically going on for us simply because we acquired our Web 2 competitor, who've done all of that business with enterprises and governments, really is that this kind of confidential computing that is decentralized and trustless and cryptography based is so far superior from what with a trusted setup is possible to be done, that itself becomes a use case for decentralized systems, which I find incredibly interesting. So yeah, I feel like that can bring a lot of usage as well.
And then I think I'll just do an and. So in addition to what Andrew and Yannick said, the experience, we've already talked about like the use case, user experience being a key focal point for adoption and how to put a lot of the complexities behind providing privacy solutions out of the hands of the user and making it be more or less invisible. Like it's an asset to them without them having to worry about the specifics. And that should probably be the case for all things, all interactions with crypto. Well, that in combination with just having the public become more and more aware of like what the steps are for interacting with a chain. If we think about like adoption of credit cards, for example, that took a really long time too, like several years. Where I remember, my mom carrying around a checkbook and cash like everywhere. And now her wallet is like, this thin versus like the giant thing that she used to have to carry around. So it's something like that, where like as the years go by and as the UI gets more and more familiar, that will lend itself to adoption. But then alongside that, improvement of middleware and thinking about ways that infrastructure can better support the abstraction of some of the things that we do care about in Web 2, bringing them to Web 3 is important.
Other than all of that, maybe the coordination between AI agents and value transfer between agents can actually lead to massive usage because they don't care about user experience.
Interesting. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for deep level of that.